Yep.
Good. Welcome here to historical Rec Hall in Happy Valley, Pennsylvania for Penn State women's gymnastics taking on the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. These two teams have had a historical record, Minnesota holding the slight edge 13-11 over Penn State, 16th ranked Minnesota, undefeated so far in non-conference and in Big Ten competition. And Penn State has one loss that's coming from Michigan State, a Big Ten opponent, but coming off of the big win against Rutgers last week. So what can we expect from these two teams?
Well, you see Penn State warming up on the vault right now. They had a season high against Rutgers, 49.225. And we got a big crowd at Rec Hall this afternoon. What we can expect is just an exciting gymnastics meet here today. Minnesota, number 16 in America. Penn State 2 weeks ago lost to Michigan State when they were ranked number 16. So the Nittany Lions coming off that bounce-back win over Rutgers, trying to keep it going, but this is just classic Big Ten gymnastics, and I'm excited for this one.
Absolutely. It's going to be a really strong competition between these two Big Ten opponents. Like we said, Big Ten's getting more competitive by the year in terms of women's gymnastics, and both teams are really going to need the edge in this victory. Penn State with the home court advantage here in Rec Hall, and it's the annual Thon meet. So competing for a good cause, 2 weeks away from Thon and Penn State, and it's going to be a little extra electric today, a little more than usual. We can already tell the crowd's getting into it. We've got the Penn State fans always rowdy, always ready for some big time gymnastics, and then we have some Minnesota fans out there in the crowd as well. You can kind of see them on the screen right now. They're really standing out with that maroon and yellow, so there's going to be a lot of energy going into both of these teams today.
Yeah, and as you said, Minnesota leads this all-time series, but it is very close. However, they have won the last 6. So Penn State trying to put an end to that streak here today in Rec Hall. And yeah, you said it on the left side of your screen, all that yellow. The Minnesota fans were here. There are a lot of them, and they were here early. An hour early, these Golden Gopher fans were filling the stands, but Penn State fans have brought the energy as well. So it's going to be a great environment as we are closing in on getting this meet started. Penn State 5-1 on the year, 1-1 in Big Ten play. For Minnesota, they're undefeated, 6-0 and 2-0 against Big Ten opponents. This one's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Penn State trying to bounce back from that 2 weeks ago, that home loss against Michigan State. They're really going to want to grab this one before heading into the rest of their season. And like we mentioned, Penn State had their season high on vault last meet against Rutgers, a 49.225. And looking in comparison, Minnesota is going to be starting off on the uneven bars. Their highest score on the event coming in their first meet of the season with a 49.275. And they have yet to score below a 49. So really impressive numbers from that Minnesota team. Minnesota is really strong from what it's looking like on bars and floor, both ranking, both yet to score below the 49 mark, and with a team best of a 9.775 or 9.875. My apologies, I'm not reading well today. 9.875 on the uneven bars. 9.925. They just have really consistently high scores from all of these competitors across the board.
Jesse Johansson will get this meet started on the vault for Penn State. Minnesota will follow on the uneven bars.
And like you mentioned, Johansson, season high of a 9.9 on this event. She's a really strong leadoff competitor, really sets the pace for this Nittany Lions team on the vault.
Yep, and here she comes to get this meet underway.
Yurchenko full, beautiful little hop on the landing, but that form, that height, everything about that was so gorgeous, shows why she's one of their strongest competitors and why she's in that leadoff spot. So really strong start for the Nittany Lions on this event as Minnesota prepares to put their first routine up on the uneven bars.
Hey, got the energy going early. Head coach Sarah Brown over there to give Johansson a hug, and that's a great way to start it off. Now it'll be Marissa Jenks on the bars. For Minnesota, their bars routine ranked number 19, averaging a 49.138.
And that's going to be a 9.8 for Johansson to kick off Penn State's rotation on vault. Looks like it's 9-8 from one judge, 9-7 from the other, looking for a 9-7-5 to kick off this rotation. A little bit lower than what we would have expected with that landing and the way the body positioning was up in the air, but again, they do have a better view than us from the booth, so strong start overall, 9-7-5. You can't complain with scores like that in your first event. And Minnesota's taking off on bars now. Strong release move to start off, a little short, but makes the catch, gets back in that free hip handstand, down to the low bar. Beautiful, held the handstand on the low bar and back up to close out the routine. Good positioning right there on the bars. And a double layout, beautifully stuck. That positioning was exceptional. You can't ask for much better. That's an awesome leadoff routine for Minnesota out of Marissa Jenks.
Maddie Johnston now on the vault for the Nittany Lions.
And that height, that was very strong. 2 for 2 on the vault. That landing was perfect and really strong start to the rotation.
A 9.806 average on the season for Johnston. We'll see what that gets scored. Marissa Jenks with a nice start on bars for the Golden Gophers. Sophia Nguyen will follow that up.
And Jenks season high on the bars, 9.775. Not much wrong with that routine. Can't imagine she's going to do much worse than that. And Minnesota is ready to get started on one of their strongest events to kick off this meet today in Rec Hall.
Still waiting on that initial score from Marissa Jenks. On the vault, Maddie Johnston was just scored with a 9.825. So Penn State off to a nice start.
And that 9.825 is just shy of her season high of a 9.875. So consistently doing a really good job for this team. Maddie Johnston's a strong competitor for the Nittany Lions as Minnesota takes position. Next routine on the bar, it looks like it's going to be the blind release. Great catch, right to the low bar, a little bit short of that handstand, but really smooth connection. Keeps that going. Another double layout and slight step in that landing, almost a stick, so really strong start for Minnesota. A few issues with the body positioning there, but it was fluid. It was great movement across the whole routine, start to finish. So 2 for 2 for Minnesota, and Penn State coming back in on vault with Lauren Pearl.
So it's Amani Herring coming down for Penn State. A lot of height on that dismount.
A lot of height, little step, but 3 for 3 on those Yurchenko fulls. Really strong for the Nittany Lions.
On the other end for Minnesota, Marissa Jenks, who went first on the bars, was scored with a 9.9, so a nice start for the Gophers.
And that's a new season high for Marissa Jenks and the Gophers on the bars, like you just mentioned. That's exactly how you want to kick off this meet, especially not in your home gym. You're getting the lay of the land. You have the intensity. The vibe in Rec Hall right now is through the roof. And so that's a really, really strong start for them. They got to keep it up through the rest of this rotation. Little step on that last landing we saw from Minnesota on bars, but that's why there's 6 competitors and 5 contestant scores.
So on the bars for Nguyen, it was a 9.675. And yeah, you said it well. There was just a step that really took her off track on that landing. And a 9.675, the official score. And now here comes Ella Siriord.
Beautiful pirouette right into the release. Excellent catch right down to the low bar. That's the second one of those moves we've seen so far. And it's just so fluid. That's one of the strengths Minnesota has on this bar rotation. It's just the fluidity of all the movements. Those pirouettes are so strong. Right into the double back and beautifully stuck. The positioning in the air, very little deductions in that. You can tell that Minnesota team is very happy with the outcome of that routine.
Siriord averages a 9.806 on the bars. And now Bella Salcedo on vault for Penn State, averaging a 9.794. And the last time out, 9.825 for Amani Herring. So 2 9.825s in a row, and here comes Salcedo.
Beautifully done. Little step on that landing, but the positioning in the air, the height, everything off the board. She was in the perfect positioning on the vault. Got a nice, really strong punch out of that to make the rotation in the air, and she just nailed it. You could tell the confidence was there before even putting her feet on the mat. So really strong for Penn State so far as well. They're having these really strong landings, spotting well despite the crowd kind of right behind them, doing really strong, really well in this vault.
Jordan Leiden now on the bars for Minnesota. Searyard with a 9.9. Minnesota off to an impressive start.
Beautifully positioned in the air with that release. Right back down to the low bar, holds the handstand. Strong positioning, getting ready for this dismount. Double layout, and she sticks it beautifully, has that landing, big smile. You can tell these are the kind of routines that have them just ranked so high across the nation in all of these events, bars especially. And that was about as good as they get. And one thing with Minnesota we've noticed throughout this meet, their routines have such great variety. They're not all doing the same skills, but they're all making them look so fluid, so clean, and that's really shown in their consistency and their...
Here comes Kalia McElligott, the impressive freshman for Penn State.
Beautiful full, sticks that landing spots, and excellent work from McElligott. Like you just mentioned, she's a freshman, but she's already competing all around, and she's been a really strong competitor for this Penn State team across the season. And she just does everything with precision and accuracy and a lot of power. She's not the tallest competitor on this team, but she's just finding the power wherever she can get it in all of these events, and she's consistent. That's the one thing that they've been really noting and praising out of her.
Jordan Leiden with a 9.975 on the uneven bars for Minnesota.
Yeah, that perfect stick, that's going to be a season high on the event for her and for the team overall. That's near perfect. And we saw it in the body positioning and the way she handled the releases. She hit all the handstands and just that stuck landing to cap the routine. You can tell the energy was there out of this team, and you can't blame them for being as excited as they were after that. That was about as good as it gets in collegiate gymnastics.
Leiden averages just under a 9.85, and that time getting a 9.975. So impressive. On the other end, McElligott with a 9.85 on the vault to answer. And now awaiting on the bars, Gianna Gertis, who is the number 22 all-arounder in America.
And that 9.85 from McElligott on vault, that ties her season best so far. So like we just mentioned, the consistency out of her has been something to give a lot of credit to as a freshman coming in, competing in an arena like this, Big Ten gymnastics, really competitive conference. She's just handled it like a true champ, and it's showing, and it's really paying off for Penn State. And now we're looking to the bars with Minnesota. There's Gianna Gertis. Great release, that height, the body positioning in the air was exceptional. Right back down to the low bar.
Gertis with a team high average of 9.869 on the bars.
And the power and the strength in this routine, she almost gets the stick. She comes out of that second tuck a little bit early in that full twist and double back, but Minnesota's just really dominating on this event. Their power, their positioning, everything is just coming together, and it's so fluid. I keep using that word, but it's just absolutely accurate when describing them on this event, and it goes to show why they're ranked so high nationally on this apparatus.
Ava Piedrahita coming off a season-high 9.9 against Rutgers, now on the vault.
Beautifully stuck. She finds that landing. Body positioning in the air. Once again, Penn State, they're so good on getting the height off of the table, giving themselves the proper time in the air to get that rotation and nail it, and that's where they're getting these sticks from, and the energy is high. Team celebrating, rec hall lighting up after each and every stick from these Nittany Lions. It's going to come down to the wire with this meet overall. We saw it with Michigan State, and we're seeing it again. It's just Big Ten gymnastics. It's as competitive as it gets.
Piedrahita is just inside the top 25 in the NCAA on the vault with a 9.875 average. So we'll see what that one comes out to. It's also 5th in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Piedrahita, season high of a 9.95 on this event. She's near perfect and always consistent, as you mentioned. The average of her vault it's just been so strong. And she's one of the two all-around competitors for Penn State. Her and Kalia McElligott, we just mentioned, both of them starting off this meet really strong as we look to Minnesota on the bars. And they just got another 9.875 on that routine from Gianna Gertis. Maya Hooten on the closing spot, and a little bit of a fall, just misses on that landing. Gets right back up, heading back to the chalk bucket, gonna reassess, but those first 5 scores out of Minnesota, they're not gonna need to worry about this routine, but looking like she's gonna be okay, so that's the priority.
For Penn State, Piedra Hita with a 9.9 for the second meet in a row to close out the vault rotation for the Nittany Lions.
And Penn State just over a tenth shy, just under a tenth shy of their season high last weekend at Rutgers. So overall, really strong start for them on this event. A few scores lower than they probably anticipated, but there's 3 more rotations and a lot can happen. In Minnesota, they're going to close out this routine, going to restart. And out of Maya Hooten, she's just veteran presence, gets right back up there. Took a big hit there, but she looks entirely unfazed. She's going to get back into this routine, head over to the low bar, finish out strong.
Yeah, did go down hard on the mat, so most important part is that she's okay and able to continue.
Full twist and double back, and she nearly gets that stick on the landing, a little bit shaken up, and how can you not be after taking a fall like that? But handled it like a champion. They're going to count those first 5 scores, and they're in really good shape after rotation 1.
It'll be interesting to see later in this meet if that fall does anything to Hooten, especially on the floor where she's number 3 in America. But here comes the exhibition routine from Cassidy Rushlow on the vault.
Beautiful positioning, gets the spot, little hop on the landing, but big smiles out of Penn State, out of Cassidy Rushlow. Just really great consistency in the same vault from everyone. It just looks so strong across the board. And going back over to Minnesota on the bars, this is their new team high on the season. Like I mentioned before this event, they had a previous high of 49.275. They're half a tenth higher than that with a 49.325. So like we mentioned, really strong starts, consistency, fluidity across the board for them, and they're preparing for their exhibition routine, but that's a really strong start out of the Gophers.
Still awaiting the final score from Maya Hooten, but the exhibition for Minnesota will come from Katie Horak. For Penn State, that exhibition from Cassidy Rushlow, she was initially slated to be the first to go in this rotation, but her exhibition score a 9.775.
You know, one thing we've seen out of the exhibition routines out of Penn State all season, they're all scoring within the same range as the rest of the scores they are counting. So it just further proves the depth on this team. If they face any injuries like they had issues with a little bit last season, they're set to go with the rest of the team they can rely on, and really strong performance in the exhibitions. And we're seeing Minnesota's exhibition right now with Katie Horak. So far, so good. Beautiful pirouette to a double back, and a little bit of a fall to the knees in that landing. She really held the positioning in the air. Feet were pointed. Everything looked beautiful. She just was a little shy on that landing, but exhibition routine not going to count towards Minnesota and in the rotation. So really strong performance, minus those last 2, few blips, but doesn't matter when you hit those first 5 routines.
Yeah, so the score you see in the bottom right of your screen will be the final score after 1 rotation. Minnesota on the uneven bars, 49.325, a new season high. And Penn State on vault, a 49.15. A nice start for both teams, but the next rotation should be another exciting one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said earlier, it's going to come down to the wire between these two. And Penn State are looking to get their first win over the Gophers since 2017, and they're on pace to continue to beat their previous season's best record. So it's going to, like we keep saying, come down to it, but these teams are going to swap off. Minnesota heading over to the vault. Penn State taking the bars, Olympic rotation out of these two. Home team gets Olympic order, vault bars, beam floor, and Minnesota is going to go in their opposite. So we're about to see a really strong rotation from both these teams as they switch events.
So the score after rotation number 1, Minnesota 49.325, Penn State 49.15. A close one here at Rec Hall. The second rotation coming up here on Big Ten Plus.
And we are back in Rec Hall, ready for the second rotation between the Gophers of Minnesota and the Nittany Lions of Penn State. Minnesota leading after that first rotation with a 49.325, a season best on the bars, and Penn State 49.15 on the vault. Both teams switching, Minnesota taking the vault now, and Penn State on bars. Both teams ready to finish up their 4-minute touches on the event before kicking off the second rotation.
Yeah, so for Minnesota, this vault rotation is the worst for the team. However, it's ranked number 20 in the country. That just shows you how consistent and how well-rounded this Gopher team is, that their worst rotation is still top 20 in America. They have a 49.106 average on the season, and just really impressive that the worst on the team is still ranked number 20 in the entire NCAA. Leading it off will be Marissa Jenks.
Absolutely, and one thing to mention, both these teams are currently on their weakest apparatus, so lots of room for improvement for both these teams. Minnesota just beat their previous team record on bars, likely looking to do it again in Rec Hall. Penn State looking to make a little bit of a comeback, get that edge over Minnesota before they head to their two strongest events to close out the meet.
So starting us off on vault for Minnesota is Marissa Jenks. Jenks was also the leadoff on bars in the first rotation with a 9.9 and a nice routine to start off Minnesota's vault rotation.
Absolutely, and that's a great leadoff routine. Just such a strong start for Minnesota out of Marissa Jenks.
And now we go to the bars for Jessie Johansson, who's averaging a 9.825, the highest on the team.
Good start, great control on that release move out of Jessie Johansson. And that's going to be a 9.775 for Jenks on vault. That is just a little bit short of her previous season high, 9.825. And Jessie Johansson nearly nails that landing. Beautiful double layout right there. Just a slight step on that map, but a really strong start for Penn State on the bars. Looking to make a little bit of an improvement on this event heading into the rest of the season.
Go back to the vault for Sophia Nguyen. Marissa Jenks started it off with a 9.775.
And another really strong vault for Minnesota. Small step back. Chin a little bit down on that landing, so needed a little bit of reassurance on that balance, but like we mentioned, both teams have been really strong on this event. Minnesota 20th in the country, and it's their weakest apparatus this far, so strong start for them, and they're looking to keep the lead over Penn State as they finish out the second rotation. Still waiting on that score out of Jessie Johansson, but Maddie Johnson up next on the bars for Penn State.
Johansson and Johnston led off the vault rotation, and now the two of them lead off the bars rotation as well for the Nittany Lions. And for Nguyen on vault, it'll be a 9.775, the same score that Jenks led off with.
And Johnson's one of the all-around competitors in this meet, with a season high of a 39.425 on the all-around, and she's been really strong throughout this season for Penn State, really stepping up in that all-around role as she's about to take her lead on the uneven bars. And that is back-to-back 9.775s for Minnesota on the vault. Two really strong starts. Slight step on that landing might come back in the end of this rotation, but can't complain with two 9.775s out of your first two competitors. And the judges are chatting a little bit in regards to that first routine out of Jessie Johansson. So we're waiting on that score.
We saw this a few times. The judges discussing at the Michigan State meet here in Rec Hall. So they deliberate. All right, We are all set, so we'll see what that score is out of Johansson, and then Johnston will be good to go.
And those meetings could be out of anything. It could be measuring whether a handstand reached its full vertical, whether a connection was made throughout the routine, whether there was a tap on the ground, slight tap of the foot, transitioning from that high bar to low bar, but they got to figure it out. So now it looks like we'll be getting Johnson's score. And from the one score we see already, it looks like it's going to be a good one.
And another look here at Johansson's routine to start it. Back to Johnston live.
Really strong start on that release. Back to the low bar, holds that handstand position. Excellent job. The execution on that was phenomenal. And we're back to the high bar. Beautiful wet. And right into the double back and held that landing really, really strong out of Maddie Johnson on the bars.
Yeah, great stuck landing from Johnston. That's impressive. And now here comes Lauren Pearl on the vault for the Gophers. Two 9.775s to start this rotation. We'll see what Pearl can do.
Beautiful height in the air. Rotation was excellent. Slight help in the landing, a little bit off-centered, but she had so much time up there. Got a great height off of the table. I'm getting jumbled in my words. That's how good it was. Great height off of the table. Really strong rotation in the air. Had time. She was seemingly floating before making that landing, so was able to get a good spot. And 3 for 3 so far with Minnesota on vault. And that first score out of Jessie Johansson was a 9.65. A little bit unlike her, but after a strong routine from Maddie Johnson, they were able to pick it back up.
Yeah, still no score on Johnston. Kalia McElligott now up, and this is her worst event of the 4 as an all-arounder, averaging a 9.737, and still not a bad score at all.
Yeah, to say that's the worst of her 3 events really goes to show how strong she's been as an all-arounder, even as a freshman for this team. And her body positioning, she's so flexible but so controlled on all of these movements. She's really beautiful to watch on this event in particular.
Johnston's score comes in at a 9.875. McElligott for the dismount.
Double back, great height. She was so close to the bar on that. She got a great rotation, sticks it. Excellent work out of McElligott, and just keep seeing how she's been stepping up for this team, especially after a little bit of a shaky start for the Nittany Lions in this rotation. She really came through for that one. And coming back over to vault with Minnesota, we just got a 9.8 score out of Lauren Pearl. Really great, like we mentioned, giving her a lot of credit on the rotation and the height out of that vault. Well-deserved 9.8.
And here comes Sarah Mora down the track.
Great height, great rotation, slight step on that landing, but that was beautifully positioned up in the air, and we're going to expect a good score out of that one too. Minnesota 4 for 4 on this vault rotation. Like we keep going back to it, you mentioned before. Worst event thus far, still ranked in the top 20 in the NCAA. Out of a Big Ten team, that's not bad.
Yeah, a lot of consistency for the Gophers. And up next on bars for Penn State, Gabby Galentine.
Leah McElligott coming in 9.75 as the final score, and her positioning was just so great. Well-deserved 9.75 out of her.
After a slow start from Johansson with a 9.65, Penn State has really picked it up on the bars, and Galentine trying to do so as well.
Great handstand right there. A lot of power out of Gabby Galentine on this event, and her positioning right there on that release. Excellent and great circle there. Heading back, ready for that dismount. A lot of power out of her. Double layout, perfectly positioned in the air, and a stick out of Gabby Galentine. She is so strong on this event. Big smiles, big celebrations out of Penn State. That's a routine they really needed, and she absolutely nailed that. And that's going to be an expected big score for the Nittany Lions. And we're going to head back over to vault. Sarah Mora's got a 9.825, really strong out of them, and we saw it in the vault itself. Well deserved. And now we are looking over to Gianna Gertis on vault.
Averaging a 9.831 on the vault this season.
Ooh, 1.5 blind landing, a little bit of a step out of that line, but the height up there, the rotation, the power, it's just second to none, and it's just great performance by Minnesota, 5 for 5. So lot to come, especially with Maya Houghton, who is the best performer on the vault for Minnesota, 9.95 season high, so nearly perfect, and she's just been exceptional and very consistent throughout this season for them. So the best is yet to come, but 5 consistent vaults to kick off the second rotation out of Minnesota.
Cassidy Rushlow getting ready to go on the bars.
And
Again, Gabby Galentine gets a 9.9. Averages a 9.787, so a big jump up, and one that Penn State needed from Gabby Galentine.
And we just keep mentioning Galentine, really strong on this event, especially 9.95 season high on the uneven bars. That is nearly unheard of. That's very strong in the NCAA. So excellent out of her. She came through and performed when they needed it, and that performance out of her, very important heading into Cassidy Rushlow on bars. Flexibility and control on this event is second to none. And double back, full twist, stuck landing. She had that big celebration, big salute. And Penn State's gone 5 for 5 on bars, so one extra routine out of Ava Piedrahita might seal the deal for the second rotation, but really strong so far on this rotation. Minnesota welcoming Maya Houghton as the closer.
Houghton, number 13 in the country on vault this year.
That 1.5 we see again as the closer. Slight hop in the landing, but the control, the way she was so tight and specifically on that landing, did a really great job, executed that vault nearly perfectly. So just goes to show why she's consistently such a strong competitor, and she's scoring in those high 9, that high 9 area.
A 9.925 for Cassidy Rushlow. So it's a 9.9 from Galentine, 9.925 from Rushlow. If Piedrahita can follow this one up, Rec Hall is going to be electric. And another look here at Cassidy Rushlow on the bars with that 9.925.
And her body positioning in all of these are second to none. She just gets that stick. Knew she had that stick before even hitting her feet on the mat, but we just saw throughout that whole routine it was consistent, it was fluid, it was a really strong performance, and Piedrahita here to give the final curtain call on this event. Maya Houghton, 9.9 on that vault we just saw, closing out for Minnesota. Really strong to close the rotation with a final score of a 49.15. With
so
Piedrahita.
Piedrahita trying to wipe off that 9.65 from Johansson that started off this rotation. Piedrahita with a 9.9 season high, but the average not much lower, 9.813.
And the team's getting really excited as she heads into this final high bar series before the dismount.
Yeah, listen to this crowd on the dismount.
All we need is a stick here, double back, little hop, but beautiful full twist and double back. Positioning in the air, got a little bit of an early release on that. That's why we saw a hop on that landing, but everything else you can't really give much of a complaint about. That was a really well-executed routine to close out Penn State in the first of the 2 rotations. As we look over, second of 4 rotations, excuse me, we head over to the vault for the exhibition routine with Saria Johnson. Beautiful full twist, spots that landing, and gets the stick. Great positioning, and as we're looking at the final scores between these 2 teams, waiting on Ava Piedrahita's final score, as long as she scores higher than a 9.7, they could take this rotation. The victory on the bars would be huge for Penn State to keep this meet really close between these 2 teams. Minnesota, 16th in the country, Penn State unranked. To win here for the Nittany Lions would be huge, especially in Big Ten standings. Minnesota yet to get a loss in the season.
They entered the rotation trailing by .175, and Piedrahita gets a 9.825 to bring that gap much closer.
Yeah, it looks like Penn State is going to take this second rotation over Minnesota. These scores are just going to be so tight, so competitive. Piedrahita gets the lion ears, which is indicative of a stuck routine. It's a celebration out of the Nittany Lions.
And Maggie Mace now on the bars for the exhibition.
Really overcommitted on that handstand. We saw a little bit of an adjustment on that final handstand, but she cleans it up and she's closing out the routine like a veteran, like a champion. on this event. Double layout, beautifully done, that positioning in the air, and she's tall, so to get a perfect double layout like she just did, got the release time down to a T, she really nailed that. So excellent out of her, minus that little hiccup on the low bar to start off the routine. Really strong performance out of the exhibition on bars. And the finals are in. Penn State takes this rotation 49-275 on the bars, Minnesota 49-15 on the vault. And this is huge for this Penn State team. That is a new team high on the season. Previously with a 49-1, now 49-275. Just exceeding their own expectations and their own previous performances, constantly getting better. That's what this Nittany Lion team is looking to get out of themselves, holding themselves to that higher standard and really executing it as they head in to their 2 final and strongest events. We're looking once more at that bar routine from Penn State.
Yeah, just so important in the second rotation. Penn State wins it by .125 to make the gap .05. So after 2 of 4 rotations, Minnesota 98.475, Penn State not so far behind now, 98.425. We're halfway through this meet. 2 more rotations to come on Big Ten Plus.
And we are back heading into the 3rd rotation. Penn State warming up on the beam, their final minute and a half of that 4-minute touch. Minnesota on the floor exercise. And this meet between these 2 teams is coming down to the wire. The 2 teams separated by 0.5 tenth of a point. And it's going to come down to it, like we've seen Penn State taking the bars and Minnesota taking the Penn State taking the second rotation, Minnesota taking the first. Jenny Hansen for Minnesota, 10th season as the head coach, 114-39-1 record with the Golden Gophers. So she has seen the past 6 wins for Minnesota over Penn State. Yeah. Really competitive between these 2 teams so far.
In her 10 years, Hansen with 8 NCAA regional appearances. And on the other side, it's Sarah Brown for Penn State, just over 500, 1 win above it. So a win here would keep her out of that territory. And Sarah Brown this season has really said how proud she is of the team's fight, their energy and their consistency. And I think we've seen the energy of the 3 the most here today. After pretty much every routine, the team is out there and loud, and head coach Sarah Brown absolutely loves that in her 7th season at the helm of the Nittany Lions. So here in the 3rd rotation, Minnesota will be on the floor, and Penn State will be on their best event, the balance beam.
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, we have 3 all-arounders for Penn State today. That is an Ava Piedrahita, Kalia McElligott, and Maddie Johnson. And we've seen a lot out of these 3 today especially, but they're 3 competitors that have been so strong and so consistent for the Nittany Lions on this event especially. So Penn State hoping for a big rotation here to hold their lead, or to take the lead for the first time this meet over the Gophers. Minnesota really got to lock in on this floor exercise. They are leading by 0.5 tenth of a point. For some context, that is 1 flexed foot. A flexed foot deduction is 1/10 of a point, and they're not even trailing by that much. So it's going to come down to every single ounce of the execution on this exercise. But Minnesota really thrives on this floor exercise so far, especially this season. They have done such a great job. They have a lot of intensity, a lot of power, a lot of energy in these routines overall from their team. And Penn State, like we said, really strong on beam. So it's going to keep coming down to the wire, and it's going to matter every single skill that's executed, all the bonuses, the connections that they need to hit. It's gonna have to work out for both teams, and it's going to come down to just that when the final scores are revealed at the end.
Of the 6 competing on the balance beam for Penn State, 5 of them average above a 9.8. They're ranked number 12 in the country on the beam. Really impressive. On the other side, for Minnesota on the floor, which is ranked number 16 in the NCAA, it's also their best event. They average a 49.338, which is really impressive on the floor.
Yeah, and they have a season best by 49.575. That is about as good as it gets in the NCAA. As we look over to beam, Ava Piedrahita is going to take the leadoff spot. Really strong on this event. really strong in the all-around competition, and she's just great artistry, and she's so strong in all of her elements on this event. Heading into that back handspring layout, step out, nails it, gets the spot at the end of that beam, takes a breath. Really strong start for the Nittany Lions. That side aerial, she nails that, just standing so beautifully executed out of her on this beam. And 4 inches wide, it's really hard to do even anything on it, but that side scale especially, as she does that switch leap and twist herself, facing the other way, getting that spot at the end. She's just nailing every single element of this routine. Just a dismount left, getting prepped for that. Round off 1.5, and she sticks the landing. Excellent lead off for Penn State on this event. We mentioned Ava Piedrahita is so strong on beam, especially out of Penn State's rotation, but that's the nailed routine, nailed landing that they needed to get started and kick off this third rotation.
Piedrahita with an incredible start on the beam for Penn State. Now we go to the floor. Marissa Jenks leading off her 3rd event out of 3.
And like I mentioned before this rotation, a lot of energy out of these routines from Minnesota, a lot of power in their tumbling, so expecting some big scores and a lot of fun out of these Minnesota routines. And that punch, double, beautifully landed, stays inbounds. Little sigh of relief there at the end. That's a very difficult skill. You need a lot of power, a lot of execution to get that full double twist, but she nailed that and made it look quite simple.
Jenks must be the momentum setter. Out of 3 rotations so far, she's been the first to go on all 3 and doing a nice job here on the floor. And here comes the pass.
And Jenks the 9-9 on the bars and the 9.775 on the vault. She's just been so consistent and so strong in these first 2 events. A lot of power, like we mentioned, really strong physically and mentally. She's one of the fighters of this group. She's going to nail every single element, and she's going to fight for those landings, as we see in that punch. 1.5, like we just mentioned, she just held that landing. She stays inbounds, and now she's just having fun with it. Routine is essentially over. Gets that final pass. Really strong start once again, Minnesota. Like we said, she's the energy. She's creating it. She's getting them started off on a good note. She's so consistent. So really strong for Minnesota as we look over to beam with Penn State. Ashley Mall, excellent performer on this event. She really gets into it, draws the crowd, draws the judges, and she just is so consistent in her skills and her dance elements.
Yeah, and the craziest part about it is Mall averaging a 9.675 on the beam, the only one under a 9.8. That's how good Penn State is and how consistent Penn State is from top to bottom of this rotation.
And Ashley Mall, she's just attacking every element. She's going right into it, really taking no time to even think about it, just going for it, and she's nailed every single element. That handspring layout step out, beautifully stuck, and we just saw that standing front aerial. She is just so strong and confident on this event. That's one thing that sets her and Penn State apart in this apparatus. They just have the confidence. They know they're going to hit it. Energy is absolutely there. Rec Hall really getting into this routine out of Ashley Mall.
9.85 for Piedrahita to start it for Penn State. For Jenks on the floor, a 9.9.
And that 1.5, round off 1.5, dismount. She gets a little hop in the landing, but that whole routine was so strong, so consistent, and so fluid. She was in and out of that within 45 seconds. That's really impressive out of Penn State, but just goes to show why this is their strongest rotation. And you mentioned she's averaging the lowest of this team, but this lineup is so strong, so competitive, and so confident in this event that they can drop her score and still be nailing every other routine. And
now Lauren Pearl on the floor for the Gophers, averaging a 9.85. And that 9.85, the number sounds so high. For this team, it's really not at all. Soraya Johnson is up next, also averaging a 9.85. And then the remaining 3 for Minnesota all average above that.
And we just saw a 9.9 out of that Marissa Jenks floor routine to lead off the Gophers. So the energy is set, momentum is built, and this is another strong, competitive routine. 1.5 to front layout. Excellently done. That body positioning in the air and the power she had in that pass was exceptional. And just having fun with this routine, that's the best part of college gymnastics, is a floor exercise. These routines are so artistic, so beautifully choreographed to each individual competitor and their personality, what they thrive in, and we're really seeing that out of Minnesota especially. The artistry, the performance elements of these routines are second to none, and the bass is booming. Rec Hall, even some Penn State fans are really getting into these routines. Ashley Mall, 9.75 on that beam routine, higher than her average so far. Really strong start for Penn State on the balance beam, and that double pike you just saw on floor, that is exceptional execution in the air, and Minnesota's going to close out their second nailed routine out of Lauren Pearl. That was about as good as it gets. Really strong for them, 2 for 2. Penn State with Kalia McElligott on beam now, another one of their really strong performers on this event, another really artistic performer especially. And just wait till you get to see her connections, her elements. They're so fluid, and that's what sets her apart.
A 9.875, the season high for McElligott.
Back handspring, layout step out. Such a rare element in college gymnastics, but she nails it. She makes it look easy, and it's so beautifully executed. She gets so much height on those dance elements, and her flexibility really makes it so much prettier to watch her on this event. Chin is up, confidence is extremely high out of McElligott, especially on beam. Just had the dismount left, and she's nailing it. Beautiful 1.5 twist, and she sticks that landing. Excellent position in the air. Rec Hall really getting into it. Penn State celebrating. That's another big routine for them out of this beam rotation, their strongest event thus far. And heading back over to the floor, Lauren Pearl. They have back-to-back 9.9s on the floor. Really strong routines, and they're just nailing those elements. And like we keep saying, it's going to come down to the wire between these two.
Soraya Johnson, another one of the Gophers, averaging a 9.85, now up on the floor. And now you said it, it's not easy trying to follow up 2 9.9s in a row to begin the rotation.
Absolutely. But they're really generating momentum for each other, getting into these routines, doing the dances along on the side. The energy is high out of the Gophers, and these routines are so much fun, and you're seeing a lot of the personality come through, and we keep mentioning that's what makes college gymnastics so special. You can't see much of the Minnesota sideline, but they're really getting into this routine as well. A punch full, punch half, beautifully stuck, and there was barely any flaws, if there were any, on that first pass. So super strong start out of Minnesota in their third routine. Like you said, 9.9s are going to be hard to follow, but it's not looking like it's going to be an issue at all for Soraya Johnson.
Kalia McElligott gets a 9.9 on the beam for Penn State.
Really strong start out of both these teams on both of these events. Soraya Johnson having so much fun. Big smiles out of the whole lineup. This is a really fun, this is the epitome of a college gymnastic floor routine. Round off double back, and she nails that. She's having so much fun with it, closing out the routine, the final dance elements. And the crowd loved that one. That's another nailed routine, 3 for 3 out of Minnesota. You got to expect another high score for the Gophers. And now we're expecting the fourth routine out of Penn State on the beam. This is going to be out of Amani Herring.
Herring averages just above a 9.8 here on the beam.
Season high of a 9.925, so we're going to need another one of those big performances for the Nittany Lions following that floor routine out of Minnesota. Amani Herring really strong in this event. She takes her time, goes through every motion, that front toss, and she scrambles a little bit on that beam, and she doesn't get the landing. Not going to get the connection either, so gonna be strong, gonna be tough to recover from that one. But Amani Herring, she's one of those veteran performers, and she can make it happen. Gets that front toss into the back handspring layout step out. She nails it second time around. Just a little hiccup in that routine out of the Nittany Lions. Very unlike them, very unlike Amani Herring on that.
Johnson gets a 9.85 on the floor as Herring starts to wrap up her beam routine.
And those final elements out of Herring have been really strong. Little wobble out of that, but she's going to close out this routine with the same dismount everyone else has in the stuck landing, that front tuck full, a little different, but she gets the landing and closes that routine out strong. And it's all about the finish in this routine, in this sport, in this event. So little hiccup for Penn State, but their consistency and their strength in this event, it's not going to matter much for them. And now heading over to the floor for the Gophers, this is going to be Gianna Gertis.
9.862 average on the year for Gertis, and as I said, a top 25 in the all-around in the NCAA.
Great performance quality already we're seeing out of Gianna Gertis on this event. And she's really just showing off her flexibility, her artistry, having a lot of fun with this routine heading into that first pass. Front through into the double back. We saw her nail this pass in warm-ups, and she just made that look extremely simple, easy. She just does it so well, and going to show why she's top of the class, top of the nation for this event and just all around in general. Beautiful dance series, nails it, and having so much fun with this dance. High energy routine requires a lot of endurance, but she's just making it easy. Right into that double pike. Excellent position. She gets that landing. Celebrations all around for Minnesota, closing out this routine. And that is just another 4 for 4 Minnesota on this event. They're explosive, they're dominant, and they're really showing why they deserve to be top in the country. Top 16 team all around.
Penn State gets a 9.175 out of Amani Herring, and that's a tough number to get when Minnesota is performing like this on the floor. But the good news now is that Bella Salcedo is on the beam, who's top 30 in America.
Bella Salcedo, season high 9.95, and she just made that extremely evident in her just nailing that first skill. She's really into it. She takes her time with each event, each skill. Standing front tuck, steps out of it a little bit, but she just makes it look artistic. So not much to critique there. She just has fun with this routine. Different levels, she's up on her toes, she's down on her knees. A lot of fun out of this routine for her, and she just is so comfortable and so confident that she can have this fun and make it look so artistic.
Gianna Gertis on the floor gets a 9.925. Minnesota really impressive in this rotation.
And that ties her season high on this event. She's just so consistent. Bella Salcedo stuck landing on that front full, really exaggerates that stick, but out of that routine, it absolutely deserves it. That's the recall Penn State needed on that after Amani Herring had a little bit of a hiccup on that routine. We saw Bella Salcedo so strong on that event, and that's what they're going to need out of the rest of this lineup on beam with Maddie Johnson closing out. Johnson's been so strong. So big things to come for Penn State on this event. Minnesota taking another fun, high-energy floor routine onto this apparatus. This is out of Emily Koch. Front handspring, double full. Beautifully done. Really strong team with the front tumbling we've seen on these routines.
Emily Cook averaging a 9.869 this season for Minnesota, trying to add to this incredible rotation so far.
Extreme energy, extreme height, and just rebound on that leap pass, and heading into the second pass on the floor exercise. Very strong performance out of Emily Cook. Beautiful position in the air, gets the landing right into the dance elements. Such a fun routine. Whole crowd loving it. Minnesota's bench really eating this one right up. Final pass. That's a front handspring, 1.5. Nailed. Positioning in the air, the height was everything. And this is another nailed routine out of the Gophers. This is going to be one tough event to follow up on, but overall, outstanding from the Gophers.
They haven't even got to their best performer yet, but we'll get to Maya Hooten after we go to back to the beam for Maddie Johnston. And Bella Salcedo at a 9.875 the last time out on the balance beam for the Nittany Lions.
Just about perfect. About as good as that Nittany Lions beam lineup will get. Closer with Maddie Johnson. Nailed that series. Excellent start for her on the balance beam. Season high of a 9.9. That's the kind of score they're going to need to close out this routine, especially after Minnesota's floor rotation.
Yeah, the floor rotation that just added a 9.9 from Emily Cook. No slowing down from the Gophers.
Maddie Johnson, just a few elements left before closing out this third rotation for the Nittany Lions. Really strong, really controlled movements so far in this routine out of Johnson. She's really taking her time and getting into this routine, only anticipating the dismount. 1.5, beautifully landed. That's exactly what Penn State needed. As they close out this rotation, they're going to be able to count that score out of Maddie Johnson. Really great dismount, good control in the air, and she found that landing exactly what they needed following a 9.9 on the floor from Emily Cook. And now we have Maya Hooten on floor, their strongest competitor yet.
Number 3 in America on the floor, averaging a 9.942. There have been 3 perfect 10s this season in the Big Ten. She has one of them, and she has 3 event titles in 4 meets.
And that front double right into the punch. Excellent control. There was just no error in that execution. Hooten is unmatched on this event, and she's just going to show us why. Beautiful height, control, body positioning in that leap pass, having fun with the routine. This is one of those routines that the whole crowd is getting into. Minnesota really strong. Their choreography is just exceptional on this event. Maya Hooten just really loving this with this Beyonce mix floor routine. She just floats through the air on that one. That was just simple, and that's not even a pass. That's a dance element. She does that because she can. Such a fun closing routine out of the Gophers. Another pass incoming for Maya Hooten. Front full to the front pike, little hop on that landing, but she is just so fun to watch. Every aspect of this routine, the dance, the tumbling, the artistry, the performance overall is just exceptional. It's so fun to watch, and she's so consistent, like you said. 3 individual event titles, and that's the perfect closing on this floor rotation for Minnesota. Lowest score being a 9.85, and after that performance out of Maya Hooten, it's looking like they're not even going to have to count that. So really strong, just heading into the beam, looking like they're going to be on top. Their so far highest on floor has been a 49.575, and it's looking like we're nearing that score once again as Maddie Johnson clocks in with that 9.825 on beam. Really strong for this rotation, especially following that fall from Imani Herring, but they're going to really have to lock it in on the floor to take the lead over the Gophers.
Yeah, Johnston closing out the rotation right on average with that 9.825, and Penn State's beam final score is set with a 49.2. And when Minnesota does what they just did on the floor, that's not a good number, not one you want to have. And one judge did give Hooten a perfect 10 on floor. The other one didn't, so I can't see what that is. We're still waiting, as Alyssa Kramer just wrapped up her exhibition routine. And the judges will talk things over about Maya Hooten's final score.
Yeah, there was barely any error in that routine, if there was any. And to the trained eye, even then there might not be that much to take off, as we saw one perfect 10 for Maya Hooten on that routine, and looks like they're going to be discussing it, but I can't imagine she's going to get much lower than that 10 if the other judge isn't going to agree with it. And Minnesota will take this event regardless of Maya Hooten's impending score. They have a 49.475 thus far, and Penn State closed out 49-2, and that's just shy of their season high 49.325 on the balance beam. But one more rotation to lock it in, and Penn State has a lot of fun on the floor exercise, a lot of consistency. They really love performing and closing out in front of Rec Hall. An audience like this floor is an event they can really get into. So still waiting on that score out of Maya Hooten.
All right, the discussion between the judges is over. We will have an exhibition routine from Leah Gonzarowski for Minnesota. And the final score for Maya Hooten is a 9.85. So that is the score that will get dropped. Soraya Johnson and Maya Hooten both with 9.85s. But wait, there might be more. Still some discussion at the judges' table here.
You got to wonder what they saw out of that routine from Maya Hooten, because if one of those scores counted was a perfect 10, that would have meant that the other judge gave a 9.7, and there wasn't much margin for error, if any, in that routine.
What happened is one judge that put up a 10 at the start switched their score to a 9.9 after that discussion, but there still is some talk. Minnesota head coach Jenny Hansen is at the judges' table right now, so we are not done quite yet. Still have the exhibition routine that we're waiting on.
Still going to talk it over, but Penn State getting themselves equipped and ready to start their 4-minute touch after this exhibition out of Minnesota, but so far doing a really great job in this rotation. The floor is going to have to be a spectacular rotation if they want to take this lead.
Judge standing up now, really getting into this discussion. So much power at that table. Oh, you see heads turning in the background, everyone looking on to see this discussion.
Minnesota fans, though there aren't the majority in this arena is Penn State. Minnesota has their own, an extremely lively section of fans. They were just getting into it with the Minnesota bench as they're waiting on this routine, but really lively fan base, a lot of fun. Looks like we might have a final score in a 9.85 for Maya Hooten on floor, her lowest of the season, despite that beautifully executed routine.
All right, we're all good now. We can breathe. It is a 9.85 from Maya Hooten, and now Leah Gonzarowski for the exhibition routine on floor for Minnesota.
A lot of fun, a lot of artistry already out of this routine. And this choreography, like you have to give credit to their choreographer getting the whole team really into all these moves. And a full twist and double back, a little bit of a step out of bounds, but beautiful technique, beautiful execution in the air. A lot of fun out of this routine. You can tell why they wanted to get it performed, whether it counted for a score or not, but really strong so far. A lot of fun.
Minnesota really pulled ahead with this floor rotation. And they barely led coming into this third rotation, but as we said, their floor from top to bottom, the lineup is really impressive. I mean, you look on the exhibition routine alone from Gonzarowski, really good. And a big step ahead, now leading by .325.
Great double back, great positioning, excellent landing. This is just now 7 for 7 on the routines out of Minnesota. And like you just mentioned, the depth on this exercise is absolutely exceptional. Their lowest score on the team throughout the season on this event is a 9.775. That's
unheard of.
That's unheard of. It's extremely impressive, and they've just showed us why they've been so strong, so consistent, and why they're so coveted nationally. 16 in the nation, undefeated so far, 2-0 in the Big Ten. They're just absolutely dominant, and it's all credit to their depth on this rotation, because you're going to drop the score of your leading performer, but everyone else steps in and pulls their weight, it's not even a concern.
Yeah, and the good news for us, Molly, that floor rotation is ranked number 16. So is their beam. So it's staying fun as we get another look at Kalia McElligott on the beam. And then another look here on the floor. Just so impressive the whole way through for Minnesota. 3 rotations down, 1 to go. Minnesota with the lead over Penn State, 147.95 to 147.625. Penn State on the floor, Minnesota on the beam after this short break here on Big Ten Plus.
All right, and we are back heading into the 4th and final rotation here in Happy Valley, Minnesota, holding the lead through all 3 rotations, but Penn State cutting it close a little bit after the second, and Minnesota taking big strides in that 3rd rotation on the floor exercise. Lowest score received in a 9.85. They really just dominated that. They hold the lead by just slightly over 3/10, and for a little bit of context here, 3/10 in a meet like this can come down to a big wobble on the balance beam, and that's what it's going to make all the difference. We've been saying this whole time, going to come down to the wire. Penn State closing out on the floor exercise in front of this home crowd here at Rec Hall. Really excited to lock in. Minnesota needing to dominate these beam routines to keep their extensive lead after the 3rd rotation. What can we expect out of Penn State on the floor here?
Well, Penn State, their worst rotation is on the floor. It's ranked number 45 in the country. They just have to be pretty much perfect. As much as you hate to say that, what Minnesota just did on the floor is really impressive. It's really hard to beat. But if Penn State wants to come back and win this meet, they have to be near perfect. And you just saw the upcoming schedules for both of these teams. Minnesota will be right back here. It's not going to take too long before they get back into Rec Hall, less than 3 weeks for the Big 5 meet with a bunch of teams from the Big 10. That'll be fun, and it's not going to get easier before they come here. Their next meet, they'll be back home in Minnesota versus number 13 Michigan on Saturday at 4 o'clock. For Penn State, before they host that Big 5 meet, they are at number 12 Ohio State on Friday at 6:30. The Big Ten is very competitive, and there's not a big gap between all these top teams. And we get started on the beam for Minnesota with Emily Cook.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned a little bit with floor incoming for Penn State, Minnesota just scored a 49.475 on the floor. Penn State with a season high of a 49.3, so they're going to have to outdo themselves in every routine. There's very little to none margin for error as Minnesota is already starting off really hot in this beam rotation. But like you said, Emily Cook, she nailed that series, and they're just having fun with it. They know the confidence, the skill, and the execution they bring on all 4 of these events. They've been so strong throughout this whole meet, throughout this season. So they're just having fun heading into this last rotation. Penn State looking to lock in, welcoming in their first routine. They're going to start off on the floor with Maddie Johnson.
The other problem here for Penn State is Minnesota just did that on the floor. They could do it again here on the beam. Their floor is ranked number 16th in the country. Their beam is tied for 16th with UCLA. They average a 49.1 on the beam, and Emily Cook starts it off in a nice way.
Absolutely, really strong start out of Minnesota, like you just mentioned. And now we're headed to the floor with Maddie Johnson, one of those 3 all-arounders in today's competition. She was the anchor on that beam rotation, and now she's leading off on the floor. Gonna need really big performances out of all of these floor competitors, but Maddie Johnson is a really strong start and a good way to kick off this 4th rotation for the Nittany Lions.
Of the 6 competing today on the floor for Penn State, Johnston has the lowest average with a 9.625. And the first pass is a very good one.
Absolutely nailed. She got the height, she got the rotation down, perfectly executed, and she sticks the landing. That was a huge start for Penn State. This is a high energy, super fun routine the whole team's getting into, and this is exactly what they need to start off this fourth rotation, just needing to close the gap with the Gophers, and so far doing a really good job with that. Johnson heading into her second pass now. Front handspring, 1.5, blind landing, nails that, and that's a good 2 for 2 out of Johnson so far. Getting that "We Are Penn State" chant going on the sidelines. Got to get the whole crowd into this rotation if they want to make something happen on this rotation. A lot of fun as Maddie Johnson's going to close out this first routine on floor. And we just saw a 9-9 on beam out of Emily Cook. Like you said, Michael, really strong start for the Gophers. 1.5 to the layout. She stays in bounds and she nails that landing. Maddie Johnson, beautiful start, beautiful execution, artistry, everything that you need going for you on floor. That's going to be a hot, hot start for these Nittany Lions. And if they keep up performances like that, they have a really strong chance of closing that gap and maybe taking a lead over the 16th ranked team in the country.
Yeah, they're going to need a lot more of that, especially with Emily Cook starting off the beam rotation for Minnesota like she did. We now go to Lauren Pearl on the beam for the Gophers.
And back, beautiful handspring layout, step out, nailed landing on beam for Minnesota. Lauren Pearl, very strong competitor on this apparatus, great artistry. She really gets into it, taking her time on all of these dance elements, just thoroughly performing each and every movement of this routine. Ready to close out this second routine out of the Gophers. We're getting a good view at this dismount. Front aerial, not even their dismount, but great landing on that. Extra element there with that connected jump. Big moves out of the Gophers.
9.775 for Maddie Johnston to start the floor rotation for Penn State.
And the back handspring, gainer full. Excellent second routine out of the Gophers. So far 2 for 2, and they're just so consistent and fluid on these events. So good start for the Gophers. Now we head over on the floor to Alyssa Kramer. Alyssa Kramer had a really strong exhibition routine on the beam. Now looking to bring that energy into this floor. And so far, really fun, really high, explosive energy routine. The front handspring, double to a punch. Excellent on that landing. Beautifully done with Alyssa Kramer on this routine.
Kramer wasted no time getting into that as well. Season high, 9.875.
Give a lot of credit to this Penn State choreographer. A lot of fun, a lot of high energy, high endurance needed for these routines from the Nittany Lions, but the whole crowd really gets into it, and that's one of the major designs in these routines. You got to get everyone excited, and that's going to build momentum to generate a big routine, big outing for your home team in this arena.
Kramer right in front of her teammates on the sideline and doing a nice job here in the second routine.
Handspring 1.5 to a layout step out, and she nails that. Crowd is getting really, really excited for that. She closes out that second routine for Penn State. Beautifully done. A lot of fun for Penn State on this event. As we look over to Minnesota on the beam, they just close out that second routine, 9.85. Not much wrong there. So 2 for 2 out of Minnesota on the beam. It's looking a lot like their floor exercise as they head into their third routine with Sarah Mora.
Nothing will come easy for Penn State trying to crawl back into this when Minnesota is doing what they're doing. They just did it on the floor, and They are not slowing down here on the beam with a 9.9 and then a 9.85.
Slight.
Sarah Mora trying to follow it. Her average, not the best, at a 9.583.
Slight wobble on that first series, but she nailed it, executed really well, so not going to matter for much, especially getting these dance elements that straddle 3/4. Really difficult skill, but she made it look simple. 4 inches wide on that beam for those entirely unaware, and these athletes are just making it look like they're doing it on a floor.
9.875 for Alyssa Kramer.
And the height, the control, the airtime on that dismount is just exceptional. That's what Minnesota needed. Going 3 for 3 on these balance beam routines, and like you just mentioned, for Alyssa Kramer on floor, a 9.875. That's a really strong performance for the Nittany Lions on this exercise, and that ties Kramer's season high. So consistently performing well for this Nittany Lion team. Ava Piedrahita now on floor, one of those all-around competitors for the Nittany Lions, a consistent, strong contender, and 2-time all-around champion throughout this season so far.
Her season high on the floor is a 9.9. Her average is a 9.769, and Penn State needs everything it can get as we get closer and closer to the end of this meet.
Piedrahita is the one who can generate this momentum for Penn State. She's just such a consistent, strong performer. That full twist and double back gets that nailed landing. A lot of fun, holding back a smile, but starting to have a lot of fun in this routine. Penn State's bench really excited out of that pass. Dance elements really strong in this routine as well out of Piedrahita. And so far, season high on this event of a 9.9. So gonna need another strong performance out of her right here to keep the momentum and keep this gap closed between these two Big Ten competitors.
Top of your screen, Sarah Brown just walked past the rest of the team looking on and kind of bopping up and down with the music and big smile on her face, loving the energy from the sideline.
Very fun routine. Cornering into the second pass. Whole team's getting into the dance elements. Crowd's really loving the energy brought by this routine. And looking for another solid pass. The front through into that double back. The height, a little bit forward on that landing. Chest is a bit down, but not much else to complain about. Closing out that routine very strong. Another consistent, solid performance out of Ava Piedrahita. And we're now going to go over to the balance beam. Gianna Gertis, really strong performer for this Minnesota team. She's had an exceptional day today. 9.85 on bars, 9.85 on beam, and a 9.925 on floor. So going to close out here on the beam for her. So far, so good for Gertis. Season high of a 9.9 on beam. So
yeah, well, it was just a 9.9 for Sarah Mora for Minnesota. Just really impressive top to bottom, especially on the floor and beam in the last 2 rotations.
Absolutely, and we're seeing even more of that consistency, that execution on the beam from the Gophers. Heading into this handspring layout step out is just beautifully nailed. They have that spot landed from the second their feet leave the beam to the second they make that landing, and we're just seeing a lot of the consistency, and they're really proving today, especially on the road, why they are the 16th team in the country. Great dance elements. A little bit of a wobble there, but not going to matter for much. Gets the bonus on those 2 jumps together. Taking her time with the dance on this routine, having a lot of fun with it. Whole team getting very excited. Anticipating this dismount. Their dismounts have been the strongest asset to their beam rotation so far, and looks like we're going to see another strong one here. Handspring gainer full again, sticks it, gets that beautiful landing. That is 3 for 3 on that exact dismount out of the Gophers lineup, and you can see why they're so strong and so good at it. They just keep nailing these routines, and they've been so consistent on the landings throughout this whole meet, on every single rotation, on vault to bars, floor, and now on beam. Exceptional out of the Gophers.
Go back to the floor here for Penn State, and you talk about bringing the energy. That's exactly what you're going to get from Amani Herring, who is up next, averaging a 9.65, and the whole team really gets behind this routine, and so does the crowd.
Yeah, and Amani Herring, we saw a little bit of a hiccup on that beam routine, so a big performance here is well overdue for her. She's usually one of their strongest competitors on each of these events, and she's just, you can tell the energy's there, and Penn State's really going to lock in to these remaining routines. There's 3 more to go to close the gap with this Minnesota team, as we're going to see. Looks like not sure what the error was in that last routine, but still waiting on Piedrahita's final score as we see Amani Herring take the floor.
On the beam, Gianna Gertis gets a 9.875, and now Herring on the floor.
Piedrahita's final score coming in at a 9.55, season low for her. Not sure what the judges saw out of that, but gonna recover the energy with this floor routine of Amani Herring. So much fun, such a great music. Crowd's really gonna get into this one, and you can tell she has a lot of fun performing on this event. She has such great artistry, and then when you get to see her tumbling, the energy, the momentum that comes from that itself, gonna be big for this Nittany Lions team. That full Arabian double front, beautifully done. Gets to landing, having a lot of fun. Facial expressions, second to none out of Amani Herring. You can tell she just loves this event. This is what she's been striving for. And after that beam routine, like we saw, she's gonna have so much fun on this event. Strong first pass, sets the precedent out of this routine. And she's really just loving it. Whole team getting into it. This is what college gymnastics is about, these super fun routines heading into this leap pass. Excellent artistry, great lines, flexibility. She's just showcasing all of her strong suits on this routine. Super fun, looking to close out with another strong pass. Handspring 1.5 to front layout, gets a beautiful landing, fighting that smile on the end of that routine, but just gonna close out and have so much fun in the final moments of this routine. And as she does, that's the routine, the recovery she needed after that beam rotation, and she got it, proved that to herself, confidence booster and morale booster overall for that Nittany Lion team.
Katie Horak now on the beam after Herring's routine.
Gianna Gerds with a 9.875. After that beam routine, really strong. A little bit of a wobble. You got to think she might have had a new season high if she didn't get that initial little balance check in that last routine. But when you're Minnesota and those are the scores you're pulling with not a perfectly executed routine, there's no complaints there, as we're seeing another really strong performance out of Minnesota on the balance beam. Minnesota holding.
Amani Herring gets a 9.95 on the floor.
And that was just a beautiful performance. That's a new season high for her. And you can just tell why she's so consistent. She has so much fun, really gets into it. And when you're that involved and loving the energy of the routine, you're not as much worried about the nerves. And she's just so confident and beautifully done on the floor as Minnesota gets another 4-for-4 stick on that handspring. Gainer full, dismount on the balance beam, and they just are absolutely dialed in on this event. Like we said, they would have to be to hold this lead over the Nittany Lions, and so far it's looking good out of the Gophers, looking to go 9-0, 3-0 in the Big Ten. A lot of excitement, a lot of energy as Penn State comes on back onto the floor. Kalia McElligott, freshman phenom out of Massapequa, New York. She just has another one of these high energy, fun routines. The whole team's gonna get into it. McElligott's been so strong in the all-around and especially on the floor. Super strong competitor, but also very flexible and takes her time on all of these elements, showcasing all of her strengths as a gymnast. First pass from McElligott. Double pike, beautiful lines, nails that landing, whole crowd cheering. So much fun out of McElligott, super strong start. Looking to recover from that 9.55 out of Piedrahita, but Amani Herring's 9.95 definitely set the precedent. Hard to follow, but McElligott's making it look easy. Straight lines, great dance elements, beautiful stick. So much fun. Out of this freshman, she's just outdone herself day in and day out. Handspring 1.5 to front layout, nails it. Deep sigh of relief in that corner. Another strong performance, good fun routine, great choreography. And we're gonna close out this floor exercise out of McElligott with Bella Salcedo as the anchor. Double back, greatly landed. You can tell the energy is absolutely there out of McElligott. Closes that routine, really strong performance. Season high of a 9.9. You have to think that's gonna be nearing her top, if not matching or exceeding it. That's about as good as it gets out of Penn State's floor rotation. And we have Bella Salcedo as the anchor. Salcedo's had a really strong routine, really strong meet as well. Going back over to the beam, Katie Horak with a 9.95. We just saw that stick, that beautiful landing out of her. And Minnesota is just absolutely dominant on this event tonight.
Yeah, Minnesota has already guaranteed themselves a new season high on the balance beam by a good margin. Coming into this, their high was a 49.35. Right now, they have a 49.475. And Ella Siriord averages a team high 9.85 on the beam. So they are not done yet. She's up there now.
Beautiful lines on that connection, just so fluid. And that's one of the things we've seen out of Minnesota all night. Their fluidity, their consistency, it's just second to none. As they have this anchor routine coming in on beam, following a 9.95, hard to do, but so far it's looking like it's gonna be matched. You can see Minnesota already celebrating, doing little dances on the sideline. Really excited out of today's performance in Rec Hall.
Yeah, how could you not be? Really impressive stuff from the Gophers.
Already knowing they've got that season high and just gonna close it out with another strong performance. That's a handspring, another gainer full. They're so consistent, so strong on this dismount. This whole team, top to bottom, the depth, the consistency, the execution is just absolutely spectacular. And they're gonna go home with a win today, and they're really excited about it.
9.85 for Kalia McElligott. And you said it, Bella Salcedo, the last to go on the floor for Penn State. The highest average on the team, 9.819.
Season high of a 9.95. Same with her balance beam routine. She's just so strong, so artistic, has so much fun with these routines. She's a lot of power. Punch double front, really difficult skill to do, especially at her height. Bella Salcedo is one of the tiniest on the team, but she packs so much power, as we just saw out of that one element. Super fun routine out of Salcedo. She really just is so artistic. The choreography is catered so specifically to her strengths, and she's just such a fun performer to watch.
Yeah, well, on the vault and on the floor passes as well, you can see it in her eyes. Bella Salcedo is running fast with a lot of power. She knows what she's going to do and does it to perfection, executes very well.
Absolutely. We saw her walking back and forth, kind of just getting into the mentality, heading into this closing spot for the routine. And she's just one of those performers. She's always locked in, and she's so consistent. She has so much fun. It's really spectacular to see. Another strong final pass. That positioning on that front pike, absolutely spectacular. And Bella Salcedo is just one of those all-timers for Penn State, closing out the routine. Beautiful end to this rotation out of Penn State on the floor exercise. And while they might not come away with the win, that is about as good as you're going to see out of Bella Salcedo. Still going to wait on that score to income, but Minnesota's finishing that beam rotation with a 9.95, closing with a final score of 49.575. And as you mentioned before,
Crushing
Bella
the season
Salcedo,
high.
season high previously of a 49.35. Yeah, that's exceptional. And now they have their exhibition up on beam, but when you got to be a happy Gopher today, heading home.
Well, I like that. Happy Gopher.
Happy.
Yeah, the Gophers are smiling. It's a 9.95 for Bella Salcedo to end the floor rotation.
tied with her season high. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Only thing next for Salcedo is a perfect 10, and that's not too difficult to achieve. And you got to imagine she's going to get there by the end of the year. This is how she's performing. Just 7 meets in, she's just exceptional. And Minnesota closing out with their exhibition. And Jordan Lydon on beam, she really just locked in there. Excellent way to close out the meet. Happy Groundhog Day, happy Gophers, close enough. But that Minnesota fan section is just standing up, cheering. You can see the athletes, hugs all around, dancing. Such a fun group to be around. And we're going to see the final routine of the night on Penn State's side exhibition in Ashley Mall.
Minnesota this season averaging a 196.681 as their total, and they really just blew that out of the water. And the score you see now will be the final. As good as Penn State performed with a 197.025, Minnesota just outdid the Nittany Lions. 197.525, really impressive. And Minnesota is only getting better. They're coming off 2 ranked wins over number 20 Iowa and number 21 Maryland, and they back it up nicely with a big win over Penn State on the road.
Absolutely, their first 197 of the season, and they blow that one out with an 197.525. It's just spectacular out of them. They've been so consistent, and the depth across the lineup we keep mentioning, but you can't give enough credit to it. They all pulled their weight today, and you see it, and their all-arounders and even their individual event specialists, they have just been spectacular and really proving their worth in this super tight national competition.
And the last time Minnesota was on the road was a month ago today. They had 3 home dual meets in a row, but they come into Rec Hall and make a statement. A big win over Penn State. Ashley Mall wraps things up nicely on the floor exhibition.
And that is the final out of these 2 teams. Minnesota with the 5-10 lead. That is half a point they held over the Nittany Lions. And we got a flashback a little bit to the second rotation where these teams were separated by half a tenth of a point. And Minnesota's final 2 events, they really outdid themselves, as we keep saying, but 49.575 on the beam, 49.475 on the floor. We praised their floor rotation especially, but they even outdid themselves with the beam. And the Gophers really, really gave themselves so much opportunity for success today. And Penn State, really strong, really competitive routines, but Minnesota just absolutely locked it in.
So, yeah, I mean, you said it best, Molly. They outdid themselves. Really impressive today from Minnesota. Both teams on the vault get a 49.15, and the other 3 events, Minnesota wins by a pretty good margin, especially the beam. 49.575 for Minnesota, 49.2 for Penn State. The Gophers come into Rec Hall, and they don't look like the number 16 team in the country. They look better than that. And there's only one way to show that. It won't get easier. Number 13, Michigan, up next for Minnesota. A great test for the Gophers, and with the way they look today, it's hard to beat them.
Absolutely, and not only do they not look like the 16th team in the country, but they didn't even look like the visiting team in this competition. They really just dominated through and through on every single event with every single competitor. And like you said, the road doesn't get easier from here on out. They have 9 more meets, and the season, it's a long season. The NCAA regionals aren't until 2 months from today, April 3rd. And they've got 2 more months to continue to grow, become more comfortable, more confident with these routines and these events. The season is still early for both of these teams. Lots of room for improvement and lots of potential out of both of these lineups. So really strong competition out of both these teams today.
Yeah, really, really impressive. You said it best. And the final score, Minnesota 197.525, Penn State 197.025. That will do it here from Rec Hall on Big Ten Plus. For Molly White, I'm Michael Cerroti saying, I'll see you when I see you. Minnesota with a big win over the Nittany Lions.
Fans, the ANCAR Award is presented to the gymnast with the best performance of the night. Presenting tonight's ANCAR Award is Penn State Deputy Athletic Director for Student Athlete Welfare and Development, Dr. Lauren Rhodes. Today's ANCAR Award winner, from your Nittany Lions, Bella Salcedo. And now, your individual winners. Your winners on vault with a score of 9.9 from Minnesota, Maya Hooten. And from Penn State, Ava Piedrahita. Your winner on the uneven bars with a score of 9.975 from Minnesota, Jordan Leiden. Your winners on balance beam with a score of 9.95 from Minnesota, Katie Horak and Ella Serjord. Your winners on floor with a score of 9.95 from Penn State, Amani Herring and Bella Salcedo. And your all-around winner for tonight's meet with a score of 39.525 from Minnesota, Gianna Gertis. And now, for the final team scores. For Minnesota, 197.525. And for your Penn State Nittany Lions, 197.025. On behalf of all of us at Penn State Athletics, we thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you back here on February 23rd and 24th when Penn State hosts the Big Five tournament featuring all your Big Ten gymnastic teams. For more information, visit GoPSU.